All right, I am here for Leading Young Earth Creationism with Melanie. But before we begin, we had a super chat come in before the stream even started, so I'm going to read that off from Jens van Broekhoven for 10 euros. Can't watch on stream, stuck with bad Wi-Fi. Thank you for the content. We'll catch up tomorrow. Thank you for your generous donation, Jens. I appreciate it a lot. But now on to Melanie. Melanie, how are you?
Hey, pretty good.
Good. And so you're here to tell the story about you leaving Young Earth Creationism.
Yes.
So, when did you become a Young Earth Creationist?
I mean, I pretty much always, like, as far as I can remember, I pretty much always was. Earth was created in 6 days, therefore that's what happened. They also had this weird math where they said that they could calculate. They said that they could calculate from Adam and Eve to Jesus, and then we knew how much time was from Jesus to present day, which actually seems to not be the case to me. But I'm not a biblical scholar. I think there's a gap in there, from what I could tell.
Yeah,
you also have the problem of. You also have the problem of, well, how old were these people, before the flood? Because that was, all kinds of magic. And then before leaving Eden, how long did fertility last? When did these people have kids? I guess that still doesn't get you to millions of years, but.
Yeah, it's always an iffy thing when you try to add up that chronology and assume that it's just going to be literally accurate in every detail. And yeah. So this was something that you learned in church? Was there any schooling involved with this? Parents? What was?
So I was in I guess, traditional school up until through third grade, and I don't remember them ever talking about it. Church, it would depend on where you were. Like, out in more rural churches, that's what they would believe. In churches closer to population centers, they would not be so strict about that, which makes some sense because the Catholic Church doesn't actually disclaim most of evolution.
Right. So what about church?
But like at home and we were homeschooled, that was definitely a thing.
Oh, okay. So there was homeschooling. I feel like creationism gives homeschooling a bad rap because a lot of parents homeschool their kids to teach them creationism, but there are other reasons you might want to homeschool your kids that don't involve miseducating them. And so
yeah, it does, and I can see how someone would come to that conclusion, like, oh, I just want to homeschool my kids so that I can just be in this cult. And it's like, well, maybe I just don't want to be in the other cult of public schools.
Yeah, so. there are some many places the public schools perform very poorly, at least in lots of urban cities in the United States. And so, and I even know of some people in Canada who are homeschooling their kids, not to teach them that evolution isn't true, but because they feel like they'll be doing a better job than the local schools will. So it's, yeah, I feel like that's rough. Now the churches that you went to,
rated poorly, like up here, they're some of them are, quote, the best in the nation. It's like, okay, well then it's still a government school though. So yeah. It's still, even the best ones, and I've seen, workbooks and stuff from some of these places, and it's like, no, this is not adequate in any reasonable way.
Now, you said that the churches would depend on where you were. Did you go to a variety of churches or growing up?
Yeah, so we lived in a couple different places, and a lot of times we would live closer to a city and then go farther away to a church, or go to a church in like the other city. And then sometimes it was just like, okay, well, we moved 50 miles away, so we're obviously not going to go to that church anymore. So yeah, the more rural, I mean, probably at least 5, I would say.
Wow.
I don't really have like a number.
But
that's over 18 years, right? So.
Still, I mean, that's a fair few. I think as a kid, my parents took me regularly to maybe 2 churches, I think. I mean, maybe a third, depending on if you count it, but it was like the parent church of the second one. And while that church was still getting on its feet, it would sometimes just not be able to have a service that day. And so everyone would just go back to the parent church.
Yeah.
So I think that's more like two than three, but
it was kind of like that, but I count that as like one entity, because it's like the building and then we're building a new building and it's like down the street. Like, yeah, it's the same.
Yeah.
And it had the same priest. So like, yeah, that counts as one.
Okay, fair enough. So about what age were you when you decided, or when you realized that this whole young Earth creationism thing is just not true?
It was kind of a slow, gradual thing, and probably like my mid-20s. It just got to the point where I wasn't a biologist, and I wasn't like, it doesn't usually come up on a day-to-day basis, and so I just had other things to think about.
Right. Okay, so mid-20s or so, but it was there was no aha moment, huh?
No, I was really good at just instead of leaving, because like a scientist had never, I've never like what a science said and what I thought the Bible said, which is probably actually an unfair reading. Then, which led me to some really weird results. So anytime there was evidence against it, I just say, oh, well, then all of biology is wrong. Okay, moving on.
Yeah, this entire scholarly pursuit with all these thousands of papers being published, was made up. Yeah, I mean, I
did a really good job of helping me think. Because you would think if you were going to teach your alternate version of biology, that you would just teach that alternate version of biology. But that's not really what they did. They spent most, at least in the biology book, like not necessarily the chemistry and geography, they spent most of their time talking about why they thought evolution was wrong and how all the scientists got away with faking it. And I'm like, okay, so what you're telling me is just this one big conspiracy theory. So, like, why are you even writing a science book then?
Yeah, I've seen the same thing. I didn't have any that I remember creationist textbooks used with me, but I've read some of them, and I've seen a lot of the literature that they put out, especially literature for kids. And it does seem like they don't bother spending a whole lot of time teaching anything positive in the sense of like, oh, here's a thing that we're going to teach you. Instead, it's trying to teach ways to refute evolution. And it's like, well, okay, if evolution is fake, great, but what is there out there? There must be things to know about biology. And I mean, not much.
Even at the time, I was like, this is not a science book. Like, this is a religion book at best. Like, this is your treatise on like defense of creationism. This isn't a biology book.
Right.
Like,
there's a difference.
Yeah. And it's like, if you want to write that book, if you want to write a treatise against evolution, go do that. Just don't print, ninth grade biology on.
Right.
Because they would talk about the electric fields on the Earth and why they thought those were the age they thought they were, or why they thought that based on the electrical field deterioration, why they thought the Earth was 9,000 years old. And then they were like really, really married to the fact that, or to the allegation that, I don't know if this is true or not. I never bothered to find out that T-Rexes were herbivores.
No.
And that's about it. Like, everything else was just like, well, here's a story about Noah. And it's like, okay, cool. And even like at the time believing it, like sale, like, okay, so like we already have religion class. Why?
I think you just broke up there, Melanie. I heard why even have science class? Melanie, you there?
You already have religion class. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, you froze for a little bit there. Hello?
Okay.
Uh-oh, I think we might be losing Melanie.
I'm gonna have to text him to tell. I need to text him to tell him to stop using the internet because he knows.
Oh, we have other people sucking up the bandwidth, huh? Uh-oh. All right.
Yeah.
Well, that'll happen sometimes. I'm actually going to be talking to your husband later on today for a completely different thing, not on the show. So I'll have to berate him later for that.
Yeah.
Because this is Melanie and her husband are people who I've met in person. I used to live not too far from them. What, like half hour, 40 minutes or so? Probably something like that. Of course, we're having bandwidth problems again, so yeah. And actually, to fill in time, because I don't want dead air, Melanie's husband is actually in my Dungeons and Dragons game. So there is that. So hopefully this gets fixed. If we need to, we can have Melanie reconnect. That shouldn't be too big of a problem. I will let her know to try doing that right now. Oh, and she's off of the air. Well, in that case, how is chat doing? I'm going to give Melanie a good 15 minutes or so to try to get back. If not, we may have to just call it early. If that's the case, I'm very sorry, everyone. Oh, I see Melanie back. That's way less than the 15 minutes that we were going to see how it was going. But she's still frozen. So what we're going to do is, if we can get this connection sorted out in the next, by 12:30, we'll continue on. If not, well, you know. But, oh, I'm starting to hear noises. So that's a good sign.
From because the router is in like a really inconvenient place. So, and I'm on Chrome, which takes up too much energy. So I'm gonna.
Okay. Well, I can hear you now, and the video isn't freezing at the moment, or it's a little choppy, but not too bad. So, sorry about technical difficulties, everybody. All right. And I do find interesting that we've had a nice little debate about homeschooling. I'm not going to take a side there, although the most I will say is that I do think that Young Earth Creationism. I'm gonna mute Melanie for a second. I will say that Young Earth Creationism does do bad things for the reputation of homeschooling that I don't think it deserves. Now, if you have other arguments besides that, that's a different thing. Melanie, are you back with us?
I should be. My router is right there. I can't really get any closer. So.
Okay. There
Once I get kicked off, it like doesn't like coming back on. So.
Yeah, and Robert Edson says if we still keep having troubles, you might want to switch the camera off, and we can just do sound.
Okay.
It's not as nice, but it's better than having everything freeze up. So if that continues, all right. So back to it then. I guess my next question would be, what were some of the things that you learned that were really big in getting you to see that Young Earth Creationism just wasn't actually true?
So some of the things that they taught about like breeds of animals and like things like antibiotic resistance. So it depends on where you are. So where I was, it was kind of less benign than where I am now. So the fact that you can have the fact that you can need to develop a new antibiotic or something like that, I think is pretty clear evidence of evolution. They said weird things about like breeds of dogs, where they said that you could get different breeds of dogs, but then everything that they said outside of like that statement contradicted that. So they didn't really they weren't really internally consistent necessarily.
Young Earth Creationism isn't internally consistent. Shocker.
Yeah. So I kind of did it like the opposite way, where it was like, when I started realizing that a lot of things in the Bible, or at least weren't literally true, whether or not they're like, I don't speak Hebrew and I can't interpret ancient poetry or anything like that, but at least we're not as presented true. It was kind of the other way around. It's like, okay, well, if all of this is false, well, then now there's no reason to disbelieve evolution.
Yeah. There were similar things for me. So is there anything antibiotic virus or resistances, inconsistencies in talking about things like dogs, and actually that came up in the video I'm writing a response script to right now. The person in there is talking about how, we got all these dog breeds by selecting already existing genetic traits in wolves. And so I just go through the same thing with cats and wild cats. And I just was going through and listing off mutations that we know didn't arise in wild populations, that did only arise in domesticated populations. And so it's just not true. And yet here we are, we have new traits in these animals. So
yeah, I think it's really not true, just from, even if you're like not educated at all, and like the divergence of dog species or cat species. Because if you look at a wolf and then you look at, a poodle, like those are different traits. Like a poodle is different than a lab, and it's different than a pug.
Yeah.
Like there's no way to get there from how you're saying this works.
Right, exactly. You can't just take existing genetic diversity in wolves and just get a pug or a poodle. You're going to need new genetic traits to arise through mutation. There are no other options. And we know that for a fact because we can check not only living wolf populations, but we can even check current, dead wolves, because we have wolf fossils and we have burial sites where we have ancient dogs and we can check their DNA and things like that. So we know we have wolf subfossils too. So yeah, it's not a question. Okay. So would you say that by your mid-20s, like 25 or 26, you had fully transitioned out of being a young Earth creationist?
20, yes.
Okay. And so you spent a lot of time as a young Earth creationist. Do you still have a lot of young Earth creationist friends or family?
So I don't have any like young Earth creationist holdover friends, just because I didn't have any of them in the first place. Like there were no friends there in the first place to lose or keep.
Okay.
And then as far as I know, most of my family still is.
And is there any? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
It's technically, as far as I know, all of them are, but I can confidently say that most of them are.
Okay. Is that causing any friction or anything?
I don't know that they've thought about it. I never walked in and I believe in evolution. It does come up though.
Yeah.
It does come up when somebody's like, "Whoa, I feel better now. I don't have to finish these antibiotics." And I'm like, "But you should."
Yeah.
It comes up more often than the zero amount of times than you would think, but I've never had to announce, "Hi, evolution is real."
Okay.
I got outed by not a coworker, but a co-volunteer worker.
Okay.
For being not religious anymore. And I think that they kind of assume that if I'm not religious, there's no reason to believe in the young Earth or not believe in evolution.
Right.
But I think we were too busy fighting about that to fight about evolution.
Well, that is an interesting point, because it's not too often that you find especially a young Earth type person who doesn't hold the view primarily for religious reasons. And that's one of the things that I always find suspicious about claims that, there's all this scientific evidence that says the Earth is young. It's like, then why isn't there anyone who isn't believing in one of these theological systems? Like, for instance, you don't have to be a Christian or a Orthodox Jew or a Muslim or anything like that to say that, the Earth is probably 6,000 years old and there must be some kind of creator. Like, you could just be a deist. You probably couldn't be an actual atheist, I don't think.
I don't think you would even have to be a deist, because if something created the Earth, that doesn't, like, you don't need necessarily a god for that.
I guess that's fair. But so why is it that basically no one outside of these very conservative religious groups actually thinks the Earth is that young?
And even when I was reading the book, I'm like, this is not evidence for this, y'all. Like, I believe it anyways, but this is not. You're not making a good point. Like, I don't know why I have to even read this book. Like,
right.
There's nothing in science that ever convinced me of any of that.
Yeah.
In fact, at one point, I just, my mom got really mad at me when I told her I was under 12, I think, and I told her that, like, science was all wrong because, like, that's what I was being presented with. And so she made me read this book about Christian scientists, and then I shut up after that, but I still thought it was all wrong. Like, all of it, the whole of science.
Did it point out that most Christian scientists didn't believe in young Earth creationist nonsense? Or was it just trying to say, look, we got, like, Andrew Snelling and Georgia Purdom, they're creationists?
Some of them were prior to that being an issue, I think. They didn't touch this on the subject at all, but it was like, the guy who invented the microscope. Like, some of them, I think, were before that time.
Oh, yeah. I always love that one. It's like, all these great scientists from, like, the 16th century, they were creationists as well. As, like, yeah, that's the only thing you could be, really. There weren't other options.
Yeah, that might have made sense at the time. That's kind of the point of science, to improve on what we have continuously. Yeah,
it's a strange argument. So do you think it would actually cause some friction if that was a thing that you just kind of went out with and was like, hey, family, I don't know, mom, dad, brothers, sisters. Yeah, evolution is totally a thing. Do you think they would be upset? Or do you think maybe the irreligiosity would be a bigger issue?
Yeah, definitely the religious conflicts would be a bigger issue. We're kind of not having it be an issue right now.
Right.
Because it was like 3 years ago or something like that. So it's okay. Kind of died down at this point. But yeah, if I just went in and out, it would be more of just like an obnoxious thing to announce than it would, like, the substance of it be a problem, I guess.
Right. Yeah, and I can see that too. It's a weird thing to just go around saying, by the way, guys, evolution. Because
especially when, like, I don't have any qualifications myself. Like, okay, my education is in accounting and law.
Right.
I really am not the one to defend biological theories. Like, that's not. I'm not qualified to do that.
And I think it's a lot like most other scientific ideas. Like, no one's going around announcing how much they accept general relativity. Like, okay, like, well, that's one of the things. Like, for me, sure, it's a big part of my life because I run this channel. But for most people, it's not a bigger part of their lives to accept evolution than it is to accept, like, Maxwell's equations of electromagnetism or something. It's just like, okay, that's.
Yeah, and that depends on where you are. I find that kind of. Well, I don't know that. I don't think I've actually met any young Earth creationists up here, but I haven't had any religious doctrines kind of be an issue. It's much more benign in New England, or at least in New Hampshire, which is really what I can speak on. Like, nobody's out trying to do any harm based on what they think the Bible says.
Right.
Like, I haven't had to convince anybody, to take antibiotics, or that, they can actually mutate a virus. Or it's like, well, how can I get sick again? I already had this. I'm like, because it went through 5 people first. And so you have a new strain. Like,
right.
There were in a place where you would cause actual harm. So, and then the whole, like, I'm the persecuted majority. Like I'm being persecuted by people 8,000 miles away because they laugh at me. It's like, okay, well, even assuming it's completely unjust, like 90+% of you believe the same thing. So like the need to go out and announce it, not the need to go out and announce it, because if you believe something, I guess you should announce it, but to announce it as if no one agrees with you is really odd. Right. And so it kind of was a thing in the South.
So I like Tyler West says, if the ages added up to 12,000 years, they would make the data fit it. I'm assuming it's Young Earth Creationists. If it added up to 3,000 years, they would make the same data add up to 3,000. It just happened to be 6,000. I think that's true. There's nothing objective in any part of reality that outside, I guess, Bible or their interpretation thereof, that would indicate to anyone that the Earth is 6,000 years old.
Yeah.
It's just that that's the math that they happen to use based on the Bible, or more accurately, that other people happened to use a long time ago that they just kind of latched onto. And yeah, now suddenly, conveniently, the data that we cherry pick adds up to this 6,000 year age. It's like, oh, well, isn't that nice? But no, you're definitely right. If they thought that the Bible said that it was 12,000, they would just go with 12,000 or 3,000 or whatever it said. Yeah. So did you have any, as a Young Earth Creationist, I guess, leading up into your, from being a little kid all the way up into your kind of early 20s, were there any creationist speakers or authors that you were particularly familiar with?
Not outside of the textbooks. There wasn't really, I was mostly reading like history books at that point. And then, history and novels. And then this was before internet was really like a thing. So, I mean, it existed and you could get it, but it was a lot more expensive and a lot more,
right.
You couldn't necessarily get it at like every house.
And they weren't showing like the Kent Hovind seminar series at church or anything?
No, it was Catholicism. So it was pretty much like the same thing every week. And then we never really went to because they did have like youth group and different groups and stuff, but we never really did any of that.
Okay. Now I do have a question, because officially since, I believe since basically before you were even born, the Catholic Church has been like, oh no, evolution is totally a thing that happened. And they're a little iffy on the details surrounding human evolution, but other than that, they seem pretty old earth and pro common descent. So were these particularly radical Catholic churches? What was did you notice any disconnect there? What's going on there?
So it might have just been lack of education on their part. Because if you're a priest and that's what you do all day and you're busy dealing with, counseling people for their, broken families or counseling people for like faith or whatever, you're not necessarily being like, oh, let me look up what the Vatican says on evolution.
Yeah.
And so I don't think that was necessarily malicious.
Okay.
I don't know, maybe it was, but like they're not biologists, so I'm not going to hold them to that standard.
Okay.
I know that when you got more into closer to a city and you had priests who had sometimes even been to college, then like real college, not seminary school.
Okay.
Or, I mean, I guess that's real, but it's not in a broad topic.
Right. You're not going to seminary to learn evolutionary biology.
Yeah. But because technically the Vatican is not going to come out and say this is our opinion on a scientific topic, because that's not what they exist to do.
Okay.
So the way it's worded was like just vague enough to be like, well, as far as we know, this is the best current explanation of biodiversity, and so the people will be like, well, the science could still be wrong. The Vatican didn't say evolution is true. They just didn't prohibit us from believing it.
Okay.
And kind of ran with like that because they can't say the Pope is not a scientist. The Pope is not a biologist, and even a biologist probably shouldn't be saying this specific theory in all its details 100%.
Right. Right. You can say that it's broadly correct and makes accurate predictions, but it's hard to be intellectually honest as a scientist and say, oh, this is definitely true in every detail. You just can't say that for sure. And that's one of the reasons.
And then
oh, sorry, go ahead.
And then they still have the thing where when you get to humans, then you have to believe that God like intervened at that point.
Right.
So even if you believed in all the rest of it, that would be helpful because it would help you not spread diseases, but it still doesn't get you all the way there.
So the textbooks that you were getting that were Young Earth Creationist textbooks, were these written by Catholics or were these written by the sort of the typical evangelical Protestant groups that publish most of the ones that I think people are familiar with?
They were not Catholic. They were Protestant of some vein. They're in Florida, I think. It's called Abeka. I don't know that they were actually scientists or
they probably
qualified books, but they have their own college, and I think it's in Florida.
Okay.
But they were some kind of Protestant denomination. I don't remember which one.
Right. Oh, it's also possible they weren't affiliated with a particular denomination. A lot of those sort of creationist ministry type things are not associated with a particular denomination. Like Answers in Genesis doesn't have a church affiliation. I think the only one I can think of that actually affiliates himself strongly with a particular denomination is Kent Hovind, who is a Southern Baptist, although some Southern Baptists don't like it that he associates himself with them. So, but then again, I wouldn't want to associate myself with some of those Southern Baptists either. So, anyway, not
they can put it out as to who's the worst, I guess.
Yeah, there's a group of people, some of whom live not too far from me and have churches not too far from me, who are basically in a contest to see who can be the worst person in the world.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, it's I actually who
you're in the South now, right?
Well, I'm in Arizona, which is it's very far south as far as the continental United States goes, but it's not the South in the sense of like it was never part of the Confederacy. It doesn't really have any Civil War history. Yeah, it's the Southwest, basically.
It's the greater South area, I guess.
Right.
I don't know.
But do you know who Pastor Steven Anderson is?
No.
Oh, well, you shouldn't. I mean, there's no reason for you to, but he is a guy who likes to get up and scream about basically gay people and then just use all sorts of slurs for all sorts of people, not just gay people.
Yeah.
And then say, oh, hey, why don't you come to my church? And I got someone went canvassing in my apartment complex and I got invited to his church. And I was just like, no, I'm going to pass. So, yeah. And Robert Adsit points out that Kent is New Independent Fundamentalist Baptist, or Fundamental Baptist, or is it Fundamentalist Baptist? I'm not sure. Adjacent. And Steven Anderson is also part of that movement. And they had a falling out after Kent Hovind's self-declared annulment of his second marriage, which was an interesting thing.
Yeah, I don't know that that's how annulments work, but okay.
Yeah, it's crazy. So, was there ever any question about why it was that you were relying on non-Catholic sources for all these things, or was it just like, it agrees with what your parents want you to learn, so that's what they're just going to do?
Not really, and there was probably some parts where they were like, oh, and this specific doctrine is on page 105, like, isn't it right? But it was probably just I probably just assumed that there was a lack of Catholic biology books, and so that's why we would use the Protestant biology books.
Yeah, well, of course, the reason
in like Catholic obscure colleges that would take your money to teach you fake science either. So
right. Well, and one of the big reasons that there aren't a lot of Catholic biology books is that when Catholics write biology books, they just write regular old biology books by and large. There isn't really a cottage industry of Catholic authors writing pseudoscience about biology.
Yeah, that's probably it. And they just publish it as a biology book, not as a Catholic biology book. I would imagine.
Yeah. And I mean, I actually went to a Catholic high school, and we did not use any like religiously themed biology book. We just had a biology book that you could buy for a public school. It was just a regular old biology book, and it had a full section on biological evolution. It wasn't super in depth, and my biology teacher was not as well versed on the subject as I would have liked, but still, we were not taught Young Earth Creationism. So, and by the way,
I don't know that it would have been.
Go ahead.
I don't know that it would have been better if I had been in a public school, and I'm glad I was not in a public school for just other reasons. I know that the private school, ironically, the private Catholic schools in the area did teach actual biology, but the public schools, that would have probably still been an issue. They might have not harped on it as much, but I know one guy who substitute taught, and he would make a point to teach that biology was when he did, even like regardless of what class it was weird. It's like, oh, I'm substitute teaching history today, and so I'm going to tell the kids that biology is fake. I'm like, you're insane, but all right. Like,
that is so weird.
It was arguably illegal in Louisiana to teach biology in public schools.
That is sad, but it doesn't surprise me all that much.
Yeah. So one statute that was passed like in the 80s and then eventually got overturned by the Supreme Court, because of course it did, that
right.
said that you can't teach evolution in biology class. And then they rewrote it to be more Supreme Court proof, to where it says you can't teach, or it doesn't say you can't teach evolution, but it says that if one teacher wants to teach alternative theories, you have to provide resources for them to do that if you're going to teach the mainstream theory.
Right.
I have this statute right here. The State Board of Elementary and Secondary Education, upon request of a city, parish, or other local school board, shall allow and assist teachers, principals, and other school administrators to create and foster an environment which promotes critical thinking skills, logical analysis, and open and objective discussion of scientific theories being studied, including but not limited to evolution, the origins of life, global warming, and human cloning. So if one person in your school board wants to teach the alternate theories of any of those things, just know we just picked those at random, right? You know, nothing specific about those things. You know, evolution, abiogenesis, which we don't know the name of, global warming, and cloning.
Yeah,
if you can't support both theories, then you can't teach either one.
I love how obviously politically selected those are. Like, those are clearly like Republican bugbears about science. And look, I know a lot of Democrats who are pretty science denial-y, especially about things like diet and vaccines. So I'm not just picking on the Republicans here, but Republicans tend to believe the same kind of pseudoscience nonsense that I was raised to believe. I wasn't raised by anti-vaxxers or by crunchy vegan people who believe stupid things about nutrition. So I don't go after it a lot. But yeah, it's very obvious in a lot of these deep South states that no one's saying, oh, you need to be able to teach alternative theories about Newton's laws or like the electric universe theory. Like, no one cares about that. They're like, oh, it's evolution and climate change. Yeah, those are the things that are super controversial in the scientific world. It's like, no, those are the things that are controversial among Republican voters and fundamentalist Christians, who tend to be similar people.
Yeah, and even a guy who was testifying against the bill was like, okay, so are you saying that we don't need critical thought in science and chemistry or in any of these other things? Like, just these things. We only need critical thought here? Bobby Jindal, who was the governor.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Bobby Joe.
yeah, he was the governor at the time, and somebody asked him during a re-election if he believes in evolution. He has a PhD in biology, and he said he was absent that day.
He was what? I'm
So
sorry.
that's kind of like a summary of like how the state of like public schools were.
Melanie, you roboted just a little bit when you said what the governor who was up for re-election had said. What did he say when he was asked about evolution?
He said he was absent that day.
Absent that day. Oh.
He has a PhD in biology.
So that day would have been every single day is basically what that means, because you can't get a PhD in biology and not be there when they talk about evolution, because they're going to talk about it pretty much every day.
And like, I understand why he answered that, because he can't get up there and, okay, look, y'all are stupid, we're going to teach science. If he wants to get reelected anyway, he can't do that.
Right.
But like that's the kind of thing he had to say to then be in charge of the school system.
Well, and I think that's one of the things that's a problem for really both major parties, is there are things that are obviously wrong, but if you want to take a strong stand against them, you're not going to be able to be elected in that party to work on the policies that, generally speaking, that party tends to work on. Like if you want to do things like introduce, like, I don't know, lower taxes or something, and you want to do that through the Republican Party, who, they're probably the only party that's going to do it, even though they're not very reliable at it. You got to pretend, you got to play the game. And the same thing will happen in other areas. Like if you want to, I don't know, expand the food stamp program as a Democrat, sometimes you're going to have to play dumb on other things. Like, oh yeah, we should totally be labeling GMOs and instituting public funding for safety studies on these, even though that's already been done. So it's an unfortunate part of politics, I think. And I don't want to.
It was just, my point on it's not the fault of homeschooling or even really my parents necessarily. It's just, this is how it was where I was. And so I would not have been better. Like this was not because I was home, not in any other system where I was.
Right. Yeah, because the public schools were seriously failing on that count, huh? It seems like. I mean, it seems a lot of the Deep South has a problem with getting evolution taught. So, yeah. Now, sorry, I do have a question about, so you said that you didn't think that the priests or like family members or anything were being dishonest. What do you think about the textbook authors? Do you think that they were being dishonest, or do you think they really bought into this?
Author.
Well, we're getting some.
They had no writing that time. And the
You're roboting again. I'm sorry. I think. Melanie, could you start back over again? You're getting choppy.
Yes. So the textbook, I don't think that they had any business writing that textbook either way, because I kind of hold people to the standard of what you purport yourself to be. So if you present yourself as a biologist, I'm going to hold you to the standard of a biologist. And if you don't meet that standard, you shouldn't have been teaching biology or presenting yourself as a biologist.
Right.
So believed it, in which case they shouldn't have been putting themselves as biologists because they obviously didn't know biology, or they didn't believe it, in which case they were lying when they wrote the textbook. The former is probably more likely. I mean, I've never met these people, obviously, but just from what I've read about, read in their own marketing, but yeah, like you're still responsible for writing bad biology because you held yourself out to have a qualification that you don't actually have. Right.
And I do apologize again for the connection problems. We'll just say, you know what? Melanie lives out in the hinterlands of America, where there's no internet. The internet is brought in by mule, is what's going on. You have mule-based internet out there, right?
In some cities here, yeah.
Yeah, basically. I mean, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but yeah, unfortunately, there's only so much we can do about that. And unless it becomes so bad that we just can't have the conversation, I want to keep it going because I feel like, stories about leaving Young Earth Creationism are something I want to get out there. So one thing I'm curious about is, so you said things about like, what is it? Bacterial resistances to antibiotics. Was there anything that really made you realize that the Earth wasn't young in terms of just the actual chronological like age of the universe or the Earth?
That was pretty much just a religious thing. I never saw anything that I accepted as science that would have indicated the age of the Earth at all.
Okay.
So, I mean, it's weird because like they made all these arguments that are horrible arguments, and okay, I don't believe you,
right?
Like I don't believe any of the things you're saying, but I believe it because I believe it for this other reason. So once that went away, it was like, okay, well, mainstream science is probably right then because there's not just all these scientists basis to see what they can like get away with. And you're the only person saying that it's 6,000 and
right, everyone else
from the Bible anymore, so it's not true.
Yeah, and some of the arguments for the 6,000-year-old Earth are just so bad. I remember one in particular that was from Scientific Creationism by, I think it was Henry Morris. I don't know if you're familiar with Henry Morris, but he's sort of like the second generation of creationists way back in like the 70s. And he had this thing where like, oh, the accumulation of these minerals in the ocean as part of its salt content indicates that the world couldn't be 6,000 years old because then it would be saltier. But he has this table where he has a whole bunch of other elements that have, various trace amounts in the ocean and how long they would take to accumulate. And one of them said a century. Like, and I think it was aluminum. It would only take 100 years for that much aluminum to get into the ocean. It's like, well, then why isn't the world 100 years old? There's got to be something else going on here. You can't be giving me the whole story.
Really serious aluminum problem in the ocean.
Right, exactly. Are we going to have like a high aluminum problem in 100 years? Like, this can't be true. Like, it doesn't work on its own as an argument. And a lot of them are like that. There's one I've seen is like, oh, the oldest single tree is like 4,000 years old. It's like, oh, okay. What does that have to do with anything? And then I heard things like, well, if the oldest tree is
really.
Sorry, say that again.
They like an argument for their own theory. All they ever do. They just attacked science itself and they attacked evolution. Like, oh, well, we carbon dated this wrong.
Oh, we're breaking up. Melanie, you there?
Yeah, I'm
all right. Well, I think what we're gonna do is, because we're having some trouble with breaking up, is I think we're just gonna open it up to questions, and we'll see how the connection goes. And if the connection gets much worse, we'll probably just unfortunately have to call it, because it's getting a little tough to have a conversation. And hey, sometimes that kind of thing happens. But all right, so we are now open for audience questions. Of course, I will be asking questions in the order that they are asked, unless, of course, there is a super chat. Super chats will jump to the front of the line. So if you really want to make sure your question gets answered, that's how you do it. Otherwise, yeah, we'll just see what people have to ask. Let's see. And I did have a question for me from Eric. Eric, yeah, he was asking about, he's trying to get me in contact with Dr. Mary Schweitzer. Yeah, remind me after the stream, send me a message or something, and I will try to figure out what to do about that. So him getting me in touch with her, because I would like to have Dr. Mary Schweitzer on for Leaving Young Earth Creationism, and also to talk about the way creationists have used her paleontology work for their own ends while misrepresenting both her and her work. So, all right, let's see what questions we might have. I'm going to check through the chat. This is true from Dark Knight's Apologetics. It's not a question, but it's already been proven that Kent is a liar. Yeah, no. I don't know if you know, but Kent Hovind is one of the guys who I watched when I was a Young Earth Creationist. And so he's sort of now he's a topic on my channel. Oh, and there goes Melanie.
I've seen people do rebuttal videos on him.
Yeah. I'm actually, the next one is Tuesday. So, yeah, and Tesla Ranger says the oldest person alive is just over 100 years old. Does that mean the flood only happened 100 years ago? And yeah, that's the kind of argument that you're getting from a lot of Young Earth creationists. It's like, oh, the oldest tree is 4,000 years ago. What happened 4,000 years ago? It's like, nothing. Maybe that's just how old trees get. All right, so we'll just continue talking, but we are open to questions right now. So.
Okay, and it was weird because if the flood came and that's your go-to answer for why something doesn't line up with your theory. If the flood just came and messed up all the evidence, then you can't say one way or the other
right.
how old anything is before that.
And one of the other problems is that the flood would in fact leave some evidence, and we don't see any of it. Actually, it would leave unmistakable evidence worldwide. And we have a question, and the question is Melanie still a Christian? Although I do always tell my guests they may answer questions about their current religious views, but there is no expectation that they have to. So you may answer that if you
Okay, I didn't know.
Okay, there you go.
I am not.
Oh, there was a crocoduck in your textbook?
Okay, so I actually got clarification on this after I told you that. So apparently a crocoduck is a specific iteration of a half duck, half crocodile, which was not in my textbook, but there was a half duck, half crocodile, or maybe it was half alligator. They didn't really say in my textbook. There was a bunch of crocodiles standing around it in a picture, standing around a nest, and the crocodiles had a nest for some reason, and then out of an egg hatched a crocodile body with a duck head. Oh. And these crocodiles had really confused faces. And then the duck crocodile thing was saying mama. And then as if to tell you that yes, this is the baby of these things.
And
they were like,
evolution
well,
is evolution
was true. Yeah. If evolution was true, then you would see this.
Oh man.
And I had a pretty good idea that that's not what evolution said. I never really looked into. Well, I had no ability really to look into it at the time, anyway. But
right, yeah, that's.
I was just. I don't know why you're trying to debunk this, but you're bad at it.
That is really bad. Yeah, that is not at all what evolution says. Which is one of those things where it's you basically have to use straw men of evolution in order to argue against it, because if you understand it, then you probably know why it's true. And Trim Trask is asking his traditional question at this point. Is pineapple evil? I must know.
Pineapple is amoral because it doesn't have sapience.
What about the action of putting pineapple on a pizza?
That's also amoral because I mean, unless it's someone else's pizza and you're trespassing onto their pizza.
Okay, so I can't. So being like the pineapple bandit who sneaks into people's houses and tosses pineapple on their pizza, that's immoral. Okay.
Well, yeah, because that's trespassing and destruction of property. If it's your own pineapple and your own pizza.
Okay. I'm of the opinion that putting pineapple on pizza is not evil, but it is also not recommended. And yeah, Trim Trask is
I don't think it would taste good, but I've never had it, so.
Yeah. Apparently, YouTube Surgeon General has had people trespass on his pizza. Well, that's unfortunate.
I mean, I believe that, and that's immoral, especially if it's your last convenient food. Then you either have to not eat or spend a lot more money to get food right away.
Well, I hope
have
that
no
no one
tolerance for food.
is forced into starvation via pineapple. Tell you what, if you have ever been forced to starve as a result of pineapple being maliciously added to your pizza without your consent, let me know, and we'll try to help out. As a chat.
It can mean anything.
So Tyler West asked, is Melanie angry about losing those early years of education?
I mean, it would have been cool not to. Like, I mean, but my mom was not like maliciously like, let's see how we can waste people's time. Like, she actually believed this. So it was just kind of, it's kind of like you have to take the good with the bad. Like, I didn't have to go to public school, which was a pretty abusive system. But the thing that came with it was my mom believes these weird things about science. So the people at the top, the people like writing the textbooks, like those people, it's like, if I think about it, yeah, I'm kind of angry at it, but because they know what they're doing. But most people, I don't even think most teachers can teach it. I mean, they believe it. So obviously, if you believe a thing, that's what you're going to teach.
Right. Yeah. I'm of a generally similar opinion that the people who are presenting this in private schools or homeschool situations, and the people presenting it in like Sunday school classrooms or from the pulpit are probably just duped. But the people who are textbook authors and running creationist organizations are mostly just con artists, is basically what I would say.
Like, I was really mad about it at the time when I actually agreed with the textbook, because I was like, or with the conclusion of the textbook anyway, because it's like, this is a waste of time and I don't want to waste time right now. But now it's like, yeah, that's just it, you know, you take the bad with the good. I never probably would have been a biologist or a doctor anyway, so I don't know how much that really affects my life.
Okay. And Lechtron asks, how did you make such a cute baby?
Genetics and doctors and science. Actually, he's a science baby, kind of. Not with like IVF or anything like that, but we would have both been dead if we hadn't been in a real hospital where you should be when you have a baby. So
I am also a fan of having babies in hospitals, unless you really, really want to risk having you or the baby die.
Yeah, because evolution deselected for being able to give birth in humans, because we developed sentience quicker than we developed than we read out the easy ability to do that. Yeah,
humans have, without medical intervention, humans have an unusually high infant mortality rate and death and childbirth rate. Like, cows don't have very high death and childbirth rates. Like, cows,
cows that would die in childbirth died out. We didn't try to keep them alive.
Yeah. All right. So let's see. I believe I'm going to double check to make sure I'm not missing anything. All right. Luca Meduno asks, your favorite dinosaur?
I don't really spend that much time reading about dinosaurs. I like the little cute cartoon dinosaurs on baby pajamas, I guess.
Okay, I think I've seen those baby pajamas.
Well, we have better ones in a higher size. I'm glad you answered that on Facebook, because I was not sure why those clothes bothered me, and now I am. So they don't bother me anymore.
Okay. What was it? Like a Stegosaurus, a T-Rex, and like a Brachiosaurus or something?
It was. I don't know all the names of the dinosaurs, but it was like the long one on the movie where they eat Land Before Time, and then it was the spiky one, which I think is a Stegosaurus, and then it was a giraffe and a tiger.
A giraffe and a tiger. Yeah, that's a weird combination. Like, why you would put these modern animals?
They're really contemporary.
Okay.
But in the bigger size now, we have just like dinosaurs. But they're not biologically accurate either, because they're like bright red and blue and yellow.
Right. Well, I mean, it's a cartoon for kids. I try not to be too picky about media for dinosaurs if the same media would be similarly inaccurate about modern animals. Like if you're showing me a brightly colored cartoon tiger, right? Yeah.
I don't even know that the other clothes were supposed to be like. I really don't. I think they were just like, yeah, throw some animals on there. I don't think they were like, yeah, let's teach this.
Yeah, well,
but I think subconsciously I did, and I was like, I hate these clothes, and I don't know why.
This is amusing. It's not a question, but apparently Luca has a girlfriend from Caserta near Naples, and I think because I think the girlfriend is the accurate part. So I think she got mad at me because I tried one pineapple pizza for real. Nice. Luca is in fact Italian, so if anyone knows whether or not pizza on pineapple is evil, it would be Luca.
Yeah, that's a really weird deal breaker. Or really weird vetting.
I mean, hey, you gotta have deal breakers. So Trim Tarask asks if you could be any animal extinct or not, what would it be?
I mean, I don't know. Like, I kind of like humans. We're sapient and rational. At least half of us. But
I always go with if you have the chance to be a dinosaur, be a dinosaur.
Well, you are a dinosaur.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm biased, and you're
Everybody's
biased.
happy with what they are. I guess. I don't know. I've never had any strong desire to be anything else because you're either not as intelligent. Mostly, you're just not as intelligent. But
well, that's what you humans think.
That's true. Maybe some animals are just maybe dinosaurs were secretly intelligent before they all
died.
Also,
the crows are all laughing at the humans because they think they're so smart. But all they do is just build.
Yeah, but we can get crows to do tricks for like crumbs, so I think we're smarter in that scenario.
Because crumbs are delicious. Are you sure it's you who's winning in that arrangement? You're giving up valuable food for useless tricks.
We're probably giving away food we would have thrown away anyway. Like, oh, this is the burnt into my crust.
All right, that's fair. Yeah. Actually, it's come up in the chat a little bit. Have you ever been to any of the creationist museums or theme park type things that are out there? Like there's the Creation Museum and the Ark Encounter in Kentucky, or the Creation Evidence Museum in Texas. I think there's a fossil museum in Montana.
No, that would just be, even at the time, that would have just been like money that I could have spent on something else. Like even when I believed it, like I could read the Bible for free. Like why would I go to?
Yeah, now you really can. I mean, you can read the whole Bible just online. You don't even need to buy a physical one. Which actually reminds me.
If you had to pay for one, it would be like $10, $20, but
right. Yeah. So, and actually, now that I think about it, I haven't cracked open a physical Bible in a while. If I need to read something from the Bible, I just check online. Because then I can look at 8 different translations all at once, or the original. So, yeah, the internet has it's a double-edged sword, but it definitely has some good parts to it.
Yeah.
So,
you can get
you can read it in every damn hotel ever. Well, that's true, YouTube search in general, but I'm not usually in a hotel room anymore. There was a period for a while, for about a year and 2 or 3 months, where I was in a hotel almost every weekday.
I also kind of feel like if you went to most churches and were like, I can't afford a Bible, they would give you one.
That's probably true. I know the churches that I've been to usually had spare Bibles just hanging out places. They would probably just give out. They were usually cheap ones, but still. Yeah, I think if you really wanted a Bible and you went to most churches, you could probably get one.
Yeah.
It'd probably be paperback though. So.
I don't think I've ever seen a hardcover Bible.
Really?
I've never looked though.
Well, I mean, as opposed to a leather, even if it's a soft leather cover.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, I mean actual paper, it's just made of thick paper. I have some hardcover Bibles though. I have several hardcover Bibles. I have, I think, 2 leather bound Bibles. I have, I think, 1 paper-backed Bible. I've got a hard leather covered Quran and a paperback Quran. My Bhagavad Gita is paperback. My Book of Mormons and Doctrine and Covenants is faux leather, but the soft kind. I don't know. There you go. That pretty much covers the various religious scriptures I have. Let's see. I think this is, I'm not sure if this is for you or me. Do you have the 1611? I assume that's in reference to the Bible. I do. I don't know about Melanie. Do you have
I don't know what that means.
The 1611 edition is the original edition of the King James version of the Bible. It is.
Oh, no.
It has some significant differences.
I got the, I think it's the New American version. I'm not sure, but it would have been a Catholic Bible that I got when I was 18.
Okay. The 1611, it's nice as a piece of like English literature history. I would not use it as the Bible that you would be using to read the Bible in, though. It's not easy to read. It's less easy to read than King James Bibles are normally, and those are already a little bit on the tricky side. So, yeah. And Trim Tarask, you know what? Yeah, 3 intelligence isn't doing me any good today. Yeah, think of questions. Use that. Got to work out that 3 intelligence. Maybe bump it up to a 4 if you ask good enough questions. So.
Is that on D&D stats? Because that's.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That would be pretty low.
Yeah. Well, the Tarask is a D&D monster. In fact, if you look, that's the
okay.
That picture, I believe, is from the 3rd edition art for the Tarask. Although I might be wrong. It might be 5th edition. I just can't tell because I don't know that I've ever really run a Tarask in any of my games. I feel like the Tarask is one of those monsters that people know about, but that rarely gets used.
I've only been playing it for as long as I've known Bob, and with large amounts of time of not playing it in there too. So.
Right. Oh, and apparently it is the 5th edition art for the Tarask. So okay. There you go. The Tarask, yes, Tesla Ranger says the Tarask is the D&D version of Godzilla. This is true. Although I might link it in like my community tab or something. I did come up with a 5e stat block for Godzilla that was much more specifically Godzilla. So I'm pretty happy with it. He's definitely tougher than the Tarask is, at least as standard.
Well, if you're going to make your own, like Wizards of the Coast probably isn't going to sue you, so you could just...
Right.
Or Godzilla isn't going to sue you, so you could just write it at home and they'll never know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Toho is going to come after me for my homebrew D&D version of Godzilla that I have never used. So, I mean, I guess they could try. What would they demand? Like, you have to delete it off of your
Google Drive? If they did, they would probably win, but
I mean,
I would imagine damages would be like what you would have had to pay for it if you would have bought it from them. Since all you do is do it yourself.
Well, the thing is, I don't think they can demand damages until after they send demand letters, because I'm not sure. I'm not sure how that would work. Because I know that a lot of people. Well, I know that a lot of people who end up in trouble with various like media companies for copyright violations end up just getting a takedown order, and then they just comply with that, and then that's it. That's all that happens.
Well, yeah, there's a difference a lot of the time between what someone and what, because like, okay, they're not going to hire a lawyer to sue you for $20, right? Like,
right? No, it's not worth it. Let's see. One thing is 5th edition Tarask is the weakest one. Yeah, one big problem with 5th edition is it doesn't have universal healing rules. So how fast does the Tarask heal? I don't know. It just does sometime. Let's see. For evangelists, Rome has some relevance, like relics in places like the Colosseum. I've always wondered. So I know you were Catholic, so I'm not sure if you could answer that very well, because that's obviously Rome has some pretty significant relevance for Catholics.
Pretty relevant to us. I don't know what y'all were doing.
For evangelical Protestants, Rome certainly has less significance, but I think most, at least historically aware, evangelical Protestants, which is not all of them, will know things like Paul or St. Paul was held in prison in Rome. that there were a lot of early persecutions of Christians in Rome. A lot of them will be aware of things like the Neronian persecution and things like that. So, but it does not have a hugely significant amount of religious significance for most evangelicals. I would say most of them would probably go to Jerusalem and various spots in that area for their religious pilgrimage type things. I don't know that I've ever heard of an evangelical Protestant going to Rome for anything like that. I would say you might kind of think, they might think of Rome sort of the same way they might think of like Patmos or something, which is like, oh, an author of biblical texts lived there for a while. Okay, cool. So, yeah. Oh, okay. Investor Freya, I missed the start of the stream. How long ago did Melanie leave YEC?
About mid-20s. It was more because it wasn't like, oh, I realized that this translation of the Bible was wrong. It was like, okay, slowly leaving Christianity, and then with that, it's like, well, then there's no reason to disbelieve evolution anymore.
Yeah.
And then after that, I do realize, like, okay, a literal translation of Genesis isn't necessarily fair.
No, I'm actually not. I'm disinclined to believe that the original authors intended it to be a literal history of the world. I think they were creating something that they themselves knew was legendary, and that it was supposed to teach theological things.
Yeah, plus there's also two conflicting creation stories in Genesis, so it obviously wasn't meant as like a cohesive history book.
Yeah. This is a question for me from Tyler West. When are you going to debate Kent again, and what will be the topic? So actually, I meant to call him this week, and I entirely forgot. What I'm trying to do is see if I can't set up some kind of... I would like to do like a sort of a tag team debate where Kent gets a partner so that way we don't just have to hear nothing but his spiel again. And then Erica Gutsick-Gibbon is also interested in doing that kind of thing, and she would be on my team. So it will be the two of us versus Kent, and we were thinking maybe like Standing for Truth or something. Because I know Standing for Truth is sort of a Hovind fan, but he also has his own things that aren't really... He has arguments that Hovind doesn't, which is refreshing. So I'm not positive what the debate topic would be. It might be human evolution. We might go back to the dinosaur thing. We might do something more specific, like try to do something about genetics or dating or something like that. So yeah, not super confident. I did mean to call him. But actually, if you guys have suggestions as to what debate topics you would like to see, please put it down in the comments, and I will take those under serious consideration. Would you rather have a higher armor class or more hit points?
Higher armor class, because then you're not actually being injured, right? Like, that just seems less pleasant. It's like, oh, I can take a bunch of stabs, but like, you're still getting stabbed, though.
Right. Sven Wellens sent a €5 sticker saying, good job. Unfortunately, they don't integrate that with SteamYard, but I do very much appreciate that. And it's actually a pretty awesome sticker. I like that. It's like a fox, I think. It's really cool. Anyway, let's see. For me, okay, as a person, like if we're trying to translate this into the real world, then yeah, a higher armor class would probably be what I prefer. However, if it's just going to be survivability in the game, if I'm playing a character, then I think I would actually rather have more hit points, because the thing is, you're always going to get someone that's going to bypass or get through your armor class. And it's very rare to have an attack that bypasses your hit points, or that can just immediately get over them. So I would say that you're probably more survivable in a game with a high amount of randomness if you have more hit points. And I think D&D has enough randomness that I would choose hit points for a character, say. But then again, my characters are primarily going to
I
be
don't
based.
feel like I really have a great grasp on D&D. I just I play with people who have a lot more experience than me, and so like we switch through different editions and different a lot, and I don't really have the time to keep up with it.
Mm-hmm.
So I just create a character.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, and that's sort of me too. Is like when I'm doing a role playing game, I'm usually not trying to min max everything. Like to make the best statted character. Like I have an idea for a character that will be fun to play, and then I play that character, and it does not have to be the best ever rules wise. So, Kent and Echo. I suppose that's referring to like standing for truth. Yeah, I mean, standing for truth is basically just a Kent Echo, but I would like to see Kent have like a partner, because I think it would. I don't think he would object to it necessarily, but I think it would throw off his ability to simply vomit out his pre-prepared speech that he does for every debate. So I think that would be interesting. Let's see. Luca Medunu says, Young Earth Catholics do exist? How? The Pope is quite clear on the topic of evolution at Similia. Sorry, I lost the first part of the stream. So if you want to just recap that real quick.
Okay, so how is kind of partly just de facto or not de facto, just like wanted to do, and not that's what they wanted to do in the sense that they like picked it voluntarily, but I don't know. I'm not going to defend the proposition or attack it either that what they believed was 100% in line with what the Vatican proclaims. So that would be how. But also, even under Catholic doctrine, the Pope is only infallible under certain circumstances. And one of those requirements is he has to be teaching on faith or morals, of which evolution is neither, and of which biological science is neither. So he can still be wrong on those. But I think that the greatest reason how was because the Vatican is never going to put out a scientific proclamation. Like, they're never going to say, oh, these details of evolution, we believe this. Because that's not what they do. They're not a scientific organization. So the statement that they did put out was something like, we recognize that, and this is not a quote, like, we recognize that evolutionary science is the best explanation for biodiversity and life on Earth. And then there's a caveat in there about humans, so they kind of cut it off there, basically. And so you can just say that they were wrong about that. It was basically a statement that you're not required to disbelieve evolution, is what the statement really was.
Okay. And I think the problem is that most Catholics, I think, especially outside the United States, have sort of gone with the, oh, well, then let's just believe in evolution. But apparently, if you're out in, what was it, Louisiana, that might not be the case, huh?
Yeah, although then when I moved out and I was living more in a city, because that's where jobs are, and when I was at the church, I was talking to one of the CED. She wasn't the CED teacher, but she was like in charge of all the teachers. And I had complained about, like, this book said that there is this evolution thing, and she was like, "Yeah, so." So it wasn't really universally that way. I mean, and I just tend to think, in general, your culture and your location is more determining of what you're going to believe and act than what your religion actually says.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that. We have a question from Trim Tarask. I heard you talk about the politicians that have iffy laws on education. If you could say one thing to them, what would it be?
I mean, I guess it depends on who you're talking about, because you have the people at the bottom who just I would have to tell them more than one thing because I would have to educate them on all of science, and I can't do that.
Right. Send
then
them
there's
my way.
the people. There's the people who I understand the predicament that they're in, because in order to get anything done, they have to play along with this silliness. And I can see how you would justify that to yourself. I can see how you would be like, okay, well, I'm going to get chemistry and geology and calculus taught, and I have to sacrifice my friends. And I am the kind of person who takes things to their logical conclusions. I'm like, okay, well then antibiotics don't make sense, and vaccines don't make sense, and dogs don't make sense, and none of these things make sense if you don't believe in evolution. But not everybody is like that, so you're not necessarily sacrificing as much as you quote should for that trade-off. The people putting the laws through probably have some malicious intent, but the guy who wrote the bill probably is a little bit malicious, but I don't know. Like I can't hate him for that.
Okay, I think that's pretty fair. I mean, I try not to get overly political here. As far as what would I want to say to the politicians passing laws about these things? I would say, if you're not going to pass laws requiring the same level of hesitancy about other aspects of science, like, say, thermodynamics or electromagnetism or relativity or chemistry, then stop doing it about biology and geology. Because geology and biology aren't exactly on shakier grounds than, say, electromagnetics. Like, it's really not. So that's probably what I would say. I just want to say to Vesta Freya, who says, I recently turned 64, never played D&D. It's never too late to start. Never too late. So there's always time to learn how to play a fun game with some friends. So, all right. We are coming up on about an hour and a half, and I think I want to be able to take a little bit of time to make sure that I'm ready for the next thing I have to do today, which is at 2. So if we have any more questions, I will make sure that we get those asked. But other than that, I'm going to start giving some wrap-up channel news and stuff. And yeah, but we do have a question in. What are your thoughts on flat earthers?
So when they call into the show that I'm on, I just ask who is paying them. And they don't answer me, oddly enough. They're mostly just trolls.
You get flat earthers calling in?
Yeah.
Awesome. You're going to have to send me a link to some of the times
I'm not convinced that flat earthers actually exist.
I think it's a lot fewer than the people who say that they're flat earthers, but I think some of them are flat earthers.
There probably are a handful of just really, really crazy people, but most of them are either trolls or actual CIA plans.
All right. So I'm going to give a little bit of channel news real quick. There's not a whole lot. So let's see. Tomorrow we have astronomy news with Landon Kurt Knoll. So if you want to hear someone who's very, very much smarter than I am, talk to you about the latest happenings in astronomy. We can talk about the craziness at Betelgeuse. We can talk about all sorts of stuff. He'll be there to answer questions. Yeah, anything to do with space, all that stuff. Stop by tomorrow. I believe that will be at, I think it's at the same time as this, but double check. It's already been scheduled. So yeah, that'll be tomorrow. Tuesday, we have Kent with Bent. I don't know why, but for some reason it's like 5 live streams in a row on the channel, which is not normally what I do. So it's a little weird, but yeah, that's happening. Then Thursday, I am not going to be scheduling a live stream. Even if someone wants a live stream, I'm not, because I'm going to finally premiere the video I've been trying to premiere for like 2 weeks now, which is going to be the final part of Creationism and the Big Bang. So that will be Friday. And then Saturday, unless something else pops up, the plan is to premiere a video that I am calling Genesis Apologetics Should Apologize the Movie, which is basically every episode edited so that there aren't any intros or outros in the middle of it. So, and yes, the plan right now is that Kent with Bent will be every Tuesday. So we're going to be, and that is a comment that Bent Hoven, no relation, has put in there. So that is the plan, every Tuesday. I mean, will we miss a week here and there? That's possible, you know. But that's pretty much it for the channel. I am working on my next video series responding to something else from AIG, because that's what my patrons voted for. So if you want a voice in the direction that the channel goes for future video series and whatnot, you can join the Patreon. The link is in the description. It have tiers starting at $1. They go all the way up to $100 if you want to give that much. You can. There's also, if you want to support the channel in a less every month sort of way, there is a Teespring account where you can buy some merch, and a Amazon wish list where you can buy me some things if you feel like you want to. Like this microphone that I'm using was purchased for me from the Amazon wish list by one of my fans. So yeah, if you want to support the channel, those are some options for you. And if you don't, or you just can't, then please don't. I appreciate your views, your likes, shares, comments. All those things help the channel quite a lot. Melanie, do you have anything that you want to plug or anything before we head out of here?
I have my website.
Okay. And by the way, send me a link to that website, and I will make sure that I add it to the description to this video. So if anyone is watching, you can either come back.
It's Total Anarchs. I didn't want to do the bidding more.
Okay, yeah, just toss that to me in you can send a Facebook message, or you can email it or something, and that will get in here within an hour or so. So if you're watching this in the future, it should already be in the description. If you're watching it live, check back in an hour or two if you want any of these links. And I think you just put it in private chat, right? Okay, yeah. So that will be in here. That will be in the. Actually, I'm just going to add it right now. Here we go. Ready?
Yeah, I usually do a show every week, but I didn't this week, so I just had too many things happen. I will next week, though. So
yeah. Well, now if you hit refresh, Melanie's website will be linked in the description because it's already there. So there you go. And when does your show air?
So it's not live. So I try to film the assumption that then I'll be able to do editing and then post it by the end of the week. That doesn't always happen. So sometime between,
okay.
It's kind of difficult to schedule like set things with infant, but that's what the deal is.
Right. Okay. Well, there you go. Check out Melanie's site. It's a sort of call-in talk thing, right?
Oh no. So I'm on someone else's show. That's a call-in show.
Okay.
I'm on Free Talk Live with someone else's show. That's just me. Pre-recorded.
Got it. Okay.
The call-in show is live. Free Talk Live is live.
And when does that air?
That is like every day, 7 to 10 Eastern time.
Okay. And
I'm
where
only
can
on it
people
once
find that if they want?
because obviously.
Okay. Right. Yeah.
freetalklive.com, and it's also on like 100 and something actual radio stations.
Okay. So I'll also put freetalklive.com as the website.
Yes.
freetalklive.com. There you go. So now that's also added in. All right. I think that's pretty much it. Thank you everyone for coming. I'm going to make sure that I am ready for my next thing, which is actually playing Dungeons and Dragons. So that'll be fun. Yeah, I hope I see all of you on Sunday tomorrow, as well as Tuesday. And yeah, and chat, I think, already bought my liquor for Tuesday because I have to drink while I listen to Kenthoven. Otherwise, I'll want to kill myself. Anyway, thanks for watching. I'm the Dapper Dinosaur. Have a good day, everybody.